Peace and welcome to Narrative, where we bring you real talk with real people. I'm your host, Dennis Calvero, along with my co-host, Keith Tran. For weekly updates and exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at narrative.today. You can also go on our website, www.narrative.today. Let's start the conversation. This is Narrative. What up, everyone? Welcome back to Narrative. This is another live episode. What up, Keith?
Yo, what's going on, D? How are you?
I'm good, man. Hanging in there. How are you?
Same old same. Doing my part, staying at home.
And this is another remote recording since we are still in quarantine. But today we'd like to introduce our other partner, Angel Acosta, live from Texas. What up, Angel?
Yo, what up, D? What up, Keith?
What's going on? Yeah, today's a special one because Angel's been kind of running the show with us behind the scenes, but we thought it'd be good to have him on the show today. He's, like D said, he's recording from Dallas, Texas. The big news that I think happened that we can talk about today is, as of today, Texas is one of the first states that's starting to relax on the social distancing guidelines, and they're starting to open up businesses. So I think in brief, they're saying that retail stores and restaurants are allowed to reopen their dining room, but only at a 25% occupancy.
Right.
So things it's a big step forward if you were, part of the industry that got really affected. So,
but yeah, but just as to me, even with what's going on and there not being a vaccine out there, I would still be very cautious about going out and just going back to my normal life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's pros and cons on both sides.
Yeah.
I'm definitely leaning more towards, I think it's a little too soon, personally.
Yeah.
Here in California, I think they're saying May 15th is the earliest that we're going to see any change.
Right.
But, on the flip side, I know it's tough for if you're a small business or you're an employee and you're working paycheck to paycheck. It's tough to not be at work.
Yeah, people need to work. How do they expect to pay rent? They're not making any money.
Yeah, exactly. And it starts from that. If you can't pay your rent, then now your mortgage holder, your landlord, they're having issues, and it's a continuous domino effect. So, like I said, I think this is a kind of a small step in the direction of trying to jumpstart our economy. I do have questions about it though, because going back to the 25% thing.
Yeah.
If a restaurant's open 25%, are they even able to break even at that point?
Right.
And it's not like you can pay 25% of your rent or 25% of your utilities,
Yeah. Well, a lot of local restaurants here, especially the independent ones, are still relying on, people ordering takeout. And, for people like me that don't like to cook as often, we've been utilizing, takeout, take home orders and bringing our food back, wiping it down, wiping the bags down and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
what's the mood like that? What's the mood out there in Texas, Angel?
It's honestly pretty lax. I see a lot of people out. I went out, I believe it was Friday, and I was meeting someone to grab some things, and it was funny when I had seen the person that called me, and was like, "Man, it's a lot of people outside today," and it was a lot of people. I think people in Texas are getting antsy because the test results don't seem as bad, right now. So it seems like there's just a lot of people just kind of anxious to kind of get out. But I will say, with everything kind of happening, I'm a bit skeptical, obviously, but I'm a bit there is a little bit of wanting to see what the next steps are going to be like once everything starts to open up. Obviously, the numbers are going to go up over time, but I think Texas is known for kind of standing on its own, and I think Texas wants to be the state at the forefront of trying to reopen and kind of setting an example.
Yeah, the other thing is there's still a lot unknown about this, this virus. Like we don't know if it could be transforming to, in the future become airborne. And once that happens, like if you're in any place that has an air conditioning on, like one person can infect the whole space.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's yeah, there's still a lot to be said about like this whole second wave thing
Yeah,
that the media has been talking about for quite a while. So where you'll see you'll see the initial hump, then because of the things we've been doing with like social distancing, you'll see the numbers go down. But then once they open it up too quickly, you see a huge spike. In most cases, the second spike is even worse than the first one.
right.
The other thing I do want to throw out there is that I am seeing that in Texas specifically, there are some small businesses that are even though that the guidelines have been loosened as of today, they're still staying with social distancing and closing their dining rooms. So so shout out to those businesses that are kind of standing up for what they believe in and saying, we want to make sure that we're taking care of our people, and we're just going to continue just doing takeout and not do the risk.
Well, here in Orange County, there's like a big uproar because last weekend, obviously, we hit temperatures like close to the 90s last weekend, and they opened up the beaches. Um, and if you happen to drive by Huntington Beach or anywhere down in Orange County, you could see that the beaches were packed. Like we even drove by there just to get out and drive around and to see people not wearing masks, like acting like nothing's going on. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, I think part of that is because of the first week or two of the national shutdowns when all the states were starting to close down. I think people were very up in arms. That's when you saw Costco having the crazy lines, toilet paper being sold out everywhere.
Right,
And for a lot of people, I think they were in the right mindset, right? Let's be more cautious than anything. And
right.
then after a couple of weeks of just being at home and not getting to go to work or not getting to leave your house, not getting to see your family and loved ones,
Yeah,
now they feel like, well, we did all that for nothing.
right,
Not realizing that we actually probably did help, lower the spread, but because it feels like very anticlimactic,
yeah.
like now I have 50 rolls of toilet paper in my house, but there's toilet paper that you can still go to the store and buy.
Bye.
So it feels very like I did all this work, but really I didn't see the reward in it. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna treat myself. I'm gonna go out and um,
damn hoarders.
yeah. So I mean I'm kind of torn. I see it from both sides. Being coming from a small business background, uh, it's tough. Yeah, it's a tough situation to be put in. I do think that what Texas is doing with giving businesses, they're loosening up the guidelines, but they're not saying you have to be open.
Yeah,
They're just saying you don't have to be closed. So they're giving them the power of choice
yeah.
there.
Well, in bigger news, um, the NCAA put out a statement, right? Um, what was that again, Angel? About
Yeah, the NCAA is aiming to start to allow players to be paid for their image and likeness. Um, this is kind of reaction into the NBA kind of opening up the G League
right,
process a bit more. Recently, the most notable player is a high school player by the name of Jalen Green, signing a $500,000 contract with the G League. And so the G League at this point is going to be bringing together a bunch of the high school's top talent. I think Jalen Green is one of them. another player named Isaiah Todd, and another player, I believe his name is Deshaun Nix. Two of the three are based in Southern California, but it's going to be a new G League team based in Southern California. It's going to be comprised of a bunch of just top high school talent, and they're going to basically put this team almost like an incubator. They're going to be a separate team in the G League, and they're going to compete against the NBA G League teams within a season, but they're not. Those games aren't going to count against the actual G League teams playing, and it's going to be more of a developmental league. So it's going to be
It's kind of like
something
a
where
grooming process, kind of like
they're gonna,
MLB has, right? But the MLB has been have, right?
yeah. It's going to be something where I'm sure it's going to expand over time. This year it's probably going to be one team. Over probably next year they'll probably expand to another team. But also within this like system, they're going to teach the players like financial literacy, and they're going to make them do community service just so they can kind of understand like the reach that they'll have as professional athletes, and not just like you know you make $1 million and you're set. It's kind of teaching them how to manage their money and how to have an impact within their communities too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
I was going to say, to me, this is huge news, because if you pay attention to collegiate sports at all, this has been a weighing topic probably for like the last decade. I would say 10 years of people just saying, look, these guys are making a ton of money for their schools. They're making a ton of money for the system, but we're not paying them at all. And it's I think this is the just them proposing this is a huge step, because right now the proposal is that they are allowed to sign endorsements. They're allowed to make money potentially off of their social media platform. They're allowed to make money off of their likeness. So for video games and things like that.
Yeah.
But they're also allowed, I believe, to mention the school, but they can't use the school's logo or any of the school's branding. So that's to try to separate the school from having any involvement in how much they're going to get paid. So I do think this is a huge step in to the point we're trying to make today, is that this is their hand is being forced. So for the last few years, I think the biggest argument is like, well, they're student athletes, they're getting paid through their education.
Right.
But now they're getting their hand is forced because the G League is introducing this new program to start paying the kids sooner, and that's in a reaction to a lot of the top recruits foregoing college and going straight to foreign leagues like the Australian League.
Yeah.
And this is
when did the NCAA like force kids to like stop going directly into the NBA out of high school? Was that an NCAA thing with the NBA?
No, it was a joint in NBA and NCAA thing. The NBA at one point started having so many kids jump from high school to the NBA, and they were bust. Like, they weren't doing well. So I think it was a thing. I think David Stern was the commissioner at the time, but I believe it was something to kind of help the NBA. They were losing money, franchises were losing money. They would invest millions into a kid who wouldn't pan out, and it kept happening. It happened a lot, and so that was, their reaction at that time. Now,
one of the guys that went to my high school is Ed O'Bannon. Top player in high school, went to UCLA, won a championship. He's actually one of the biggest advocates in fighting the NCAA on making money on their likeness, especially in the gaming industry. I think it was because of like the NBA 2Ks or all the games on all these platforms. The NCAA was benefiting, by them without having to give them kids any of the money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, I think, because if the G League thing we already know is moving forward, but if the NCAA proposal gets approved, what does that mean for the future of college sports, and what does the landscape look like? For instance, if now they're going to allow the college players to make money, which I've always been a supporter for, because they're generating so much revenue for the college that they're playing for, but they're not getting anything on the back end. And so, for instance, let's say a high school recruit goes straight to the G League, he gets paid, so now he's considered a professional athlete. Let's say he doesn't do well. Now, does that mean he's still allowed to go back to college? Currently, under the normal rules, is you forego college eligibility as soon as you become professional. But now you're going to blur that line with college kids starting to get paid endorsement dollars. So, what does that mean
for
that kid?
Yeah. Some of these kids are just like struggling to get meals and,
Yeah. Well, and plus it just introduces there's a lot of loopholes in the system.
Yeah.
Right. So over the years, we've heard of cases where students are, they're taking money from boosters.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. But it opens the door to that. When you're giving them such a rigid, strict system to work within, these kids are going to try to find ways to make money, or there's going to be people who are going to look to solidify their relationships with them by figuring out ways to provide them or their families money.
Yeah.
So
I remember stories of like some D-boys and giving money to Iverson when he was in Georgetown. And
yeah, it's like prohibition.
Right.
When they banned alcohol, you only gave way to the mob to create a revenue stream for themselves.
Right.
So anytime you prohibit something else is going to come from it. So I think it's a smart move for the NCAA to finally start looking at that in a serious way. But I do think it opens a lot more questions, and hopefully we'll get those answered. I'm sure there's a lot of smart people over there that are putting together their plans and proposals.
Angel, I have a question for you. So once, say, Jalen Green's done with his contract in the G League, is he then eligible to enter the draft for the following year?
A lot of information hasn't been made public, but I'm sure once he's 1 year removed and he goes through the G League process, he'll be, eligible to enter the draft. One of the big things too, while a lot of players weren't going to the G League, is because they didn't want their rights to be owned by a particular team. So, say for instance, like a guy gets drafted by the Phoenix Suns, or or gets picked up by the Phoenix Suns and he goes to the G League. At that point, he's, his rights are owned. It's kind of like you said, like in Major League Baseball.
Yeah,
his rights are owned by that team. So,
franchise,
what this G League process is doing is allowing the kids to, literally just be a part of a system that's helping groom them, get ready for the NBA draft, and is ran by the NBA. So it's appealing for a lot of kids. I know a lot of players have been reached out to. I know they've reached out to probably the top 20 players on the college circuit, the high school circuit now. And it's going to be interesting to see, how it kind of unfolds over time. But, this is a direct response to the G League is a response to players like LaMelo going across seas. And RJ Hampton, who was another, probably a little less known player.
Yeah.
But, people have been going across seas for years now. There was a kid named Emmanuel Mudiay, who's from Dallas, who did it. Brandon Jennings did it years back. It's just now that, players and even agents, people like, Rich Paul have been a huge advocate, trying to change the system. LeVar Ball has been a huge person trying to change like the system. He even made his own league at one point that was dedicated to, trying to buck the system that the NCAA has. So it's interesting to see how it's all going to play out.
Is it the G League because Gatorade's involved, or?
I have no clue. It used to be the D League. It used to be the developmental league.
Yeah, there was a D League, right?
Yeah, I have no clue what the G stands for.
But G League is still a subsidiary of the NBA.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'll throw this out there. So the question would be, right, if you were a top recruit, your choices at this point would be you go to the G League, you make money right away, or you could go to college and potentially make money on endorsement dollars. Now, I think that there's a huge choice there between the type of school you would go to. You know, if you went to a state regional school or a school that didn't have a big alumni or fan base, that looks completely different than if you were going to Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina. You know, these huge schools that have a lot of alumni, because potentially you might make more money doing endorsements because you go to Kentucky
Yeah.
than you would that first year going to the G League.
Yeah, especially those big states or big cities where, you know, their whole town revolves around, you know, their college sports, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's towns out there that they're defined by their college.
Yeah.
And in that town, their college sports is bigger than professional sports.
Yeah. But that
So
also leads to you know, that HBO documentary, The Scheme, where it put out that guy that, you know, had all the information. Like he was so smart and he just had all this info on the best AAU players, right? And then he had relationships with all the coaches for all the top colleges. And there was definitely some money involved. And it led to the FBI investigating in these colleges, like paying, you know, potential players.
I mean, I'm sure that's happening a lot more than we're aware of.
Yeah. I mean, but if you're Jalen Green, you're looking to be the top, you know, the top. You is would you say he was the number one player in the nation? That is.
Yeah, he's arguably one of the top. It's like three players in contention for being the number one player. It's Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, and Evan Mobley, who is also I think he committed to. Yeah, he committed to USC. But there was some like the NCAA started investigating USC because USC hired Evan's, I believe, dad as a coach, and then he committed. So you know, the NCAA or these universities at least have been trying to find clever ways to pay or get some type of compensation to these players or their families for years. But I think, you know, I mean, at this point, if you have, you know, the federal government getting involved on how people are getting involved, I feel like, or how players are getting paid, I think it's probably best that, you know, you just compensate these kids because, you know, these coaches are making, you know, 7 mil, 10 mil a year, you know, and they're coaching these players who, like you said, a lot of these players' families are starving, you know, and so these kids want to get their piece of, you know, the pie too.
Yeah, and I think kids are just getting smarter. You know, I mean, look at Zion, right? He went. He would. Everyone knew that he was going to go to the league, but he had to spend his 1 year in college. And then what happens when he comes into the league? He sits out for like 80% of the season.
Gets hurt.
You know, yeah, because you never know. It's always a big question mark.
Right.
So why not give the kids, if they're prime and they're ready for it, the opportunity to jump right in? The question I would also ask is, right now we're talking about basketball, right? Basketball to me has always been the sport where if you excelled in high school, you could jump right into the league, and we've seen many examples of that working out where they become a superstar right away. You know, Kobe, LeBron, Kevin Garnett. But what about the biggest sport that we're not talking about right now? The biggest revenue generating sport is college football.
Yeah.
You know, so what does that mean for that athlete? You know, unless you're like, you know, the last superstar college football player I can think of is Johnny Manziel. And, you know, we all kind of saw what happened with him.
Yeah.
His brand became bigger than him as a person, as a player. But imagine if Johnny Manziel had a way to make endorsement dollars. Yeah. I mean, he would have cashed out and probably never even needed to touch any league money at all.
But he comes from money, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean that's aside from the point. But yeah, I think his family was affluent.
Yeah.
But you know, it's football. I think is definitely a sport where you need to have years under your belt in some type of development league? Is it college, or is it now the NFL is going to create some type of development league?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
football kids, they're just not as marketable as basketball.
Right.
Basketball, you have 5 guys on the team. You see their face. Football, it's they play positions, so they're only on the field a third of the time, and they're wearing a helmet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variables at play.
But there is a sense of pride of like, you grew up playing football, you played Pop Warner, you played, and then you played in high school, you're like the star quarterback in high school. There is like a sense of pride in you that wants to play for a big college, especially for football, because you said, yeah, college football is one of the biggest sports right now, right? So, why wouldn't a kid be like, I want to go, if I could go to UCLA or Duke or wherever and play football, get a free education, even though they're probably just playing football most of the time. I know I went to a dinner with some guys that were pro athletes and were big in college, and they said some of them didn't even have to take a test. Like they come into class and the professor would be like, "Oh, you're excused." So
Yeah, I think with football, it's one of those things where not many 19-year-old kids, especially in a non-skill position, is going to be ready to go straight to the league.
Yeah, and with football too, there's like a 3-year rule. Like you have to be 3 years removed from high school to
join the league.
Yeah, to be able to be eligible to join. I think some of these 19-year-old kids would die if they go out there, immediately straight from high school. No matter how fast you are, no matter how strong you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that makes sense. But it's like if basketball is going to be introducing something, football has to be right behind it. Football is such a huge revenue generator.
And they've been trying, not necessarily on the amateur level as far as like the G League, but actually they have the XFL, and they've filed for bankruptcy again, but they were trying to introduce the XFL as a G League for the NFL in a sense. There's a lot of players that are really good in college that don't get the opportunity or don't get drafted and end up going to like Europe, and who watches European football?
Yeah, right.
Aside from soccer. They're trying. It's just, I think it's going to be some years out, but I did see an article about Trevor Lawrence potentially being like the next big kid to be able to cash out on his name and likeness, it's interesting to see, like, as these Heisman front runners as football starts back up, if it starts back up on time, but these Heisman front runners, the endorsements that they'll potentially get from being on ESPN every single day or being the talk of sports news radio, every day. Like, it'll be interesting to see how they are compensated. And what deals they can get.
The final question I have when I think about this article is basketball, football. That's what we talked about. But there's a huge number of sports being played in college, right? So the ones that we're not talking, lacrosse, badminton, archery, swimming, those things. And then, this year was supposed to be an Olympic year, right? So we all know that the Olympics aren't going to happen in Tokyo this year.
Yeah.
But how does Olympics, outside of a handful of sports, including basketball, is supposed to be an amateur only sport? Contest, right? But now if you have kids who are going to be sprinkled throughout that are going to get endorsement money or money from elsewhere, now how does that affect the whole scheme of, amateur sports? Or does amateur sports even exist anymore? Because where's the line you draw? Because could it be that next 17-year-old basketball star in high school, he can start making endorsement dollars?
Yeah.
Like what's the line between amateur and pro now are going to get really blurry.
Yeah. I mean, for tennis, I play tennis. So you can go pro playing tennis at 15, 16. There's a lot of young champions, especially in the women's tennis, that went really big, like Jennifer Capriati at 16. And, like it's just weird that like some sports, I guess, that have that kind of business or catalyst going. I guess it's a way of luring, them into the college, and for them to, it's obviously a business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing too that I've seen that's going to be interesting is players are going to potentially be able to receive endorsement deals or footwear endorsement deals that conflict with the university's endorsement deal. So a player that, let's say Clemson is sponsored by Nike and Trevor Lawrence, he can potentially get an Under Armour deal on his own personal contract. It's going to be interesting to see how universities try to upend that, or if universities that are with Nike are now funneling their players to get paid by Nike because they want to make sure that they keep their alliance with whatever endorsements they're getting. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. That reminds me of like in the 90s, watching the Dallas Cowboys in their old stadium. They used to have the huge swoosh on the big monitor in the sky, but then you had Emmitt Smith wearing Reeboks.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely interesting subject. I think more to come there, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
So in other news, happening real time right now is Elon Musk going crazy on Twitter.
Elon.
I don't know if you guys have been following, but he had a Twitter storm this morning where he was kind of just going very left field. But one of the notable statements he made is that he thought that Tesla stock was priced too high, and so immediately the market reacted to it, and I think it wiped a few billion dollars off of their market cap.
Made some people mad, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it does feel a little bit tone deaf on his end, because he has mentioned, in earlier interviews that he thinks it's a bad way to go about it to have factories and things like that closed down. But at the same time, it's, we don't know enough about the virus that we should be open,
Right.
But it's crazy that he would come out and say that on Twitter. I think he's also been fined before in the past for we're talking about like the Tesla stock price.
I mean, yeah, he's good for going off on rants he's got a track record of having like a big rant every quarter at least. But
yeah. I mean, I get where he's coming from, because there's definitely people out there that they need to go back to work. Something I saw recently was that just this past month alone, you had 30 million people file for unemployment. And just to put that in perspective, after the 2008 recession, which a lot of people have noted that that's the worst recession we've ever been in.
Yeah.
Peak that peak at that point was about 700,000 people filing.
Yeah.
So 700,000 people filing back in 2008, more than 30 million in this past month.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely in some crazy times that we can't even figure out what the real solution to all this is going to be, because the ultimate price is death, right? It's like, is people dying.
Yeah, I mean, or you can be the lieutenant governor of Texas and put out there in a statement that your life is not as important as the American economy. But I think it's with as much crazy things that are happening right now, there are still some businesses that are able to thrive and grow in this environment. I read an article recently that supermarkets, are, as I think anyone who's left their house right now to go to the supermarket knows that their shelves are bare, so they're not even able to keep up with the demand that's currently happening. But I think if we're not too careful and we're not supporting smaller businesses, smaller stores, that we may end up with a future where there's only 3 supermarkets, Costco, Walmart, Amazon.
It's like we're definitely going to be controlled by the 1%.
Yeah. So one thing I have been seeing recently, kind of on my social media feeds, is a lot of stay-at-home chefs or people that either were chefs professionally or they just cook a lot at home. They're starting to create kind of like at-home businesses, selling food and creating food from home.
Yeah, showing recipes, like live videos.
Yeah, I definitely think that's starting to become a market that we never saw before. Just a lot of people doing things from home. And when you're saying like live feeds, I think a lot of musicians, artists, DJs, live streaming sets from home, kind of like the concerts from home or from the couch. D Nice was kind of the first one I think that really blew up doing that.
Yeah.
But I saw an article recently that Facebook is going to start allowing live streamers to start monetizing. So I think they're now creating kind of a new segment in the industry, in the entertainment industry, to be able to monetize performances over live stream.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this maybe about a month or two ago, right around the time when the pandemic started hitting, and then we started hearing news of big festivals like Coachella being first postponed, but now it seems like they're probably going to get canceled.
Yeah.
But, would you pay for a pay-per-view event if it was like a Coachella? Like you're paying for like WrestleMania now, or you're paying for UFC now.
Right.
If Coachella was like, here's a pay-per-view event, would you think that'd be successful?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what they're charging. I think what I saw a few days ago was the Travis Scott virtual concert in Fortnite. So I think if there's an experience like that where you're using VR to engage or to be in a setting, I mean, I would. It brings us back to the Ready Player One thing, where it's like, I could be anywhere as long as I'm, have my virtual goggles on.
And I feel Coachella's tried to do that, or they're already kind of doing it. I didn't make it to Coachella I've never made it to Coachella. I usually go to South by, but I was watching a lot of the live performances from YouTube. So, maybe trying to figure out a way to combine those two could be cool. One of the main reasons I'm sure they're probably trying to find a way to keep it going is because I heard that Coachella rescheduled it and didn't cancel it because they didn't have insurance that covered, I guess, like viruses or infections or something like that, which is one of the reasons why they had tried to postpone it and not fully cancel it. So I'm sure at this point, the leaders of Coachella are trying to do whatever they can to salvage and not, fully waste or lose a lot of the dollars that they've put into the
YouTube actually put out a good documentary on Coachella. It's like the 20 years of Coachella.
20 years in the desert.
Yeah, 20 years in the desert. And it's pretty good, eye-opening doc that they put out.
Yeah, I mean, Coachella's been amazing for the last 20 years. They've had a lot of memorable moments. They had, the Daft Punk performance.
Yeah.
That was huge.
That was good. That set off like the whole DJ platform.
Yeah, for sure. The Daft Punk being at Coachella created like you had to have visuals.
Yeah,
you had to have visuals if you were an EDM artist.
Yeah,
and you had of course the Tupac hologram.
Yeah.
The tough thing with Coachella is that, from what I hear, is that all the artists, the headliners, they have to pay for their own stage production.
Right.
So, and all of this, of course, doesn't happen overnight. So this is like months, maybe even years in the works.
Yeah.
From that standpoint. So now, like Frank Ocean, he probably put together like a huge stage, and all that money was already paid, and now it's not happening. So
right.
Yeah, it's in their benefit to try to figure it out, just from the top down, to to try to see if they can recoup anything.
I've only been to one Coachella, and I was luckily to have seen the Kanye one, his second time, his big one. And his stage show was crazy. Like he had this full mural, like this old, like Gothic kind of Roman thing. It had a Medusa on there, and then like the walls even like came apart. It was
Yeah.
crazy. It was
I mean,
performance.
Kanye is legendary, known for his legendary stage setup. So
Yeah. Yeah, man. So were you hanging in there?
try my best. But yeah, we appreciate everyone staying up with us and listening and tuning in.
Yeah, man.
So we appreciate everyone. We appreciate Angel.
Thank you for coming on all the way from Texas.
Yeah, appreciate you guys, man. Yeah, let's do it more often.